No problem. Okay, I'm gonna switch back and forth a little bit between my PowerPoint and some little videos that I put together for this. So we'll see how that goes. So beginning in 2012, we had the opportunity to work at what I think is a really fascinating site at Wind Cave National Park called the Sanson site. So today, I plan to give you kind of an overview of the site and talk a little bit about its relationship to some other sites and other features around it. And then I'm also going to touch on how the National Park Service is planning to use this site to enhance their interpretation of American Indian use of the park area. So the Sanson site, which is 39CU2, is a multi-component site that's located at Wind Cave National Park in the southern Black Hills of South Dakota. The site includes a prehistoric occupation as well as the historic Sanson Ranch, which was originally established in 1880. This site, the prehistoric site, was first recorded in 1948 as what they termed a buffalo fall, and was also later investigated by Larry Agenbrod in 1972 and 1973. But the first really extensive investigations were undertaken by us at the Midwest Archaeological Center beginning in 2012. So as Karen mentioned, the land that the site is located on was added to Wind Cave in 2011. And our investigations were initially undertaken because the park wanted more information about the site for possible interpretation to the public. If you're looking at this image, you can see the boundary of the park there, and that's actually the old boundary. And so it's the sort of that little keyhole area in the middle is where the Sanson site is, and that's the property that was added to the park. So previous investigations at the site had really focused on the area of what are believed to be drive lines leading to 100-foot high drop-off and what was hoped to be a bison bed, bone bed at the base of the bluff. But while bison bone and the hearts were discovered by Agenbrod, the site did not appear to contain an extensive bone bed like many other well-known buffalo jumps like the Boer site. And for some, this brought into question whether the site was indeed a buffalo jump. So when we designed our research beginning in 2012, we designed our investigations to discover as much about the possible jump, but also about other features that might be at the site. And then we continued that work in 2014. So just to give you an idea of how prominent the drive line features are, in this image I've turned off the GPS data overlays so that you can see that the drive line is actually visible on the air photo. You can go into Google Earth and check it out. It's pretty interesting. So I don't have time today to go into detail about all the different investigations that we've conducted and all the different work that we've done. So I thought I'd just provide kind of a quick summary and then focus on a couple of important aspects about the site and why we think it's so important. So beginning in 2012, our work included pedestrian inventory, geophysical prospection, magnetometer survey was the work that we did then, archaeological excavation, which is indicated by the little blue boxes on this slide, and then also geoarchaeological evaluation of the valley floor deposits through trenches, and also extensive mapping of features using survey-grade GPS. But when we left the field in 2012, we knew that there were areas that we hadn't looked at yet, and we knew that there was more out there to be discovered. So we returned in 2014 and expanded our investigations. You can see we added a lot more area of pedestrian inventory, did some more geophysical prospection, some more excavation, more mapping, and then we also did metal detector survey around some of the historic buildings, which turned out to be crazy when you think of 100 years of historic occupation. It turns out to be a lot of metal. So what we've discovered so far to date, the site area encompasses about 76 acres overall, and there are still areas that we haven't had time to look at. So I think eventually it'll be larger than that. And based on the artifacts and the features that we've recorded, the activities that we believe took place at the site include communal hunting, food and hide processing, habitation, ceremonial activities, among others. The features, some of the features that we've recorded include drive lines, as well as other rock alignments, rock carving, stone circles, hearths, animal stone, and various artifact concentrations. And artifacts observed so far include debitage of a variety of materials, sites including chert, quartzite, and obsidian. We haven't had a chance to source the obsidian yet to find out where it's coming from. Artifacts that were collected include a variety of tools, including scrapers, bifaces, choppers, drills, projectile points, pottery. So yeah, some of the other materials that we've recovered include pottery, fauna remains, charcoal, soil samples. These are just a few examples of some of the projectile point bases and a hafted scraper, which we found quite a few of those in a very large chopper. The Sampson family also had made collections of projectile points and other materials from the site, and their collections included several obsidian projectile points and also a knife over flint and at least one metal projectile point. As far as dating at the site, so far one McKean-style point that was collected at the site suggests our earliest date of about 4,000 years ago, while our radiocarbon dating of charcoal and bison bone suggests a date range between 1,200 and 700 years ago. However, the presence of that metal projectile point in the Sampson collection, if it was from this site, suggests that the site could have been used as recently as 265 years ago, or even later. And while this is all really exciting stuff for any archaeologist, I think one of the things that makes the site really important is also its relationship to other significant features of the Southern Black Hills, and also how it complements the stories and lore of the tribes like the Lakota and the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, and many other groups that visited and lived in the Black Hills. So the site not only lies within the Black Hills, which is considered sacred by most of the tribes that had association with that area, but it's near Wind Cave, the cave being believed by the Lakota to be the place of emergence in their tribal lore. And it's also very near what's the Red Valley, or what's called the racetrack. And you can see that here between the outer edge of the hills and the interior hills. So the Sampson site is basically right at the edge of the racetrack. It's that red valley. You can see the red deposits in the soil there. And all of these, the Wind Cave, the racetrack, figure prominently in Lakota stories. Buffalo Gap is a major landmark and passageway from the plains to the hills, and you can see in this slide that Buffalo Gap is very near where the Sampson site is. So, and just to kind of confirm that relationship of the importance of Buffalo Gap, I have a quote from Luther Standing Bear, who was born in 1868, and he describes Buffalo Gap as a passageway where the buffalo entered into the hills for the winter. And when he was a child, he said his people followed the buffalo through the gap to create winter camps. And then the use of the gap in the Southern Black Hills for winter camps is also described by Nicholas Black Elk. So what Standing Bear wrote, to quote him, he said, according to tribal legend, These hills were a reclining female figure from whose breast flowed life-giving force, and to them the Lakota went as a child to its mother's arms. The various entrances to the hills were very rough and rugged, but there was one very beautiful and easy path through which both buffalo and Lakota entered. Every fall, thousands of buffalo and Lakotas went through this path to spend the winter in the hills. It was called by the Lakotas Gate of the Buffalo. And so I think significant to the Sampson site's location, if groups were moving from the plains to the hills through Buffalo Gap, they would have been following Beaver Creek, and they would have passed through the gap across the racetrack, and the first place they would have come to at the edge of the hills themselves is the Sampson site, which is on Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek is supported by Beaver Creek is fed by springs, and so the creek would have provided access to water for both bison and people. In these photos, the creeks are all dry, and Carl Sampson, who lived there, gosh, into the 80s, indicated that Beaver Creek ran up until 1950 and then went dry. But we discovered this last spring, when it rained for 2 months, that it does run, and it's actually shown on the geotopographic maps as a perennial stream. I think what happened probably with the increases in agriculture and the use of wells for center pivots, the aquifers have drawn down, but with all the rain that they had this spring, it had refilled aquifers enough that the springs began to flow again, and so both Beaver Creek and Cottonwood Creek were flowing quite heavily actually this last summer. And there is a spring actually right by the Sampson Ranch headquarters there. So obviously a great location, easy access from the Gap. You've got 2 creeks there. You've got flowing water. You've got grazed grassland for the bison, and of course the nearby bluff that would have provided the needed drop-off for the buffalo count. And then up in the upper right corner here, this photo, again, is another picture of the air photo that shows that drag line. So this site really would have provided a perfect opportunity for late autumn communal hunt, where you have smaller groups coming together at one location to participate in the communal hunt, and that would have provided the needed stores of meat and hides that would have sustained them through winter months as they moved further into the hills. The jump may have only been used by earlier visitors, though, earlier groups to the area, because once groups acquired the horse, they began to abandon communal drives, hunting instead from horseback. However, the location still would have been a very good place to gather and to hunt, regardless of whether the jump was used or not. The other advantage of this location at the confluence of Beaver and Cottonwood Creeks is that it would have provided access to Wind Cave itself. So in this slide, you can see the location of the Sampson site, and then on the left side, the location of Wind Cave, which would have been accessed through Wind Cave Canyon. And again, natural opening of Wind Cave is believed by many tribes to represent their place of emergence. So we'll take a look. So we think the groups likely gathered here in large numbers in the fall, hunted bison, spent some time processing the meat and hides, and then the large group size is evidenced by a number of factors, not the least of which is a large collection of stone circles, both those that have been discovered by us to date and those that were reported by the Sampson family. When Larry Agenbrod visited the site in 1972, he told me that Carl Sampson, who had been born and raised and lived most of his life on the ranch, told him that the entire terrace between the 2 creeks was covered with stone circles. Unfortunately, these were all picked up by the family so that the terrace could be cultivated for hay. So now they're piles of stones along the edge of the creek. But it's good to have that knowledge that there was such an extensive use of the area. This slide just kind of gives you an idea of how we sort of interpreted the use of space. The large habitation area along the creeks, up in the right-hand corner there, that would have been the gathering basin where they would have sort of herded the buffalo towards the jump. Of course, the jump itself, high processing areas, and then some of the other activities that we believe took place at the site. These are some of the stone circles that we have recorded to date, mostly along the edges of terraces where it wasn't cultivated. So you can see on the right-hand side there, they're all surviving just right along that terrace, and just above that you can see that was cultivated. And so some of them did survive. Food processing activities are indicated by the several hearths that we've found to date, as well as a large number of processing tools such as choppers, bifaces, and scrapers. Just tons of scrapers at the site, as well as really well-formed scrapers, as well as just a lot of utilized flakes and very expedient tools. And though the bone bed below the jump so far has not proven to be extensive, bison bone has been recovered from that area, as well as along the creek bank. I mentioned that photo at the beginning. We did an excavation where some bison bone was eroding from the bank this last summer in 2014, and found fairly large pieces of bison bone, and then also some smaller pieces in association with the heart that you see in this feature, which is excavated in 2012. The lack of an extensive bone bed is likely a result of several factors, including what we believe were probably smaller drives. In other words, they weren't driving large herds, they were just driving as many animals as they really needed. But also, we think we had a pretty large group using this area, so I think it was also probably very efficient use of the bison that they did kill, so there wasn't a lot left behind. And then also, it being that close to the stream, we think there was also probably flash flooding and stream action that would have washed away some of the bone bed that remained. One of the other interesting features that we found this last year when we were there are what we believe to be prayer circles. And these features have a direct view across the valley to the drive line. And some of the ethnographic resources that I've looked at indicate that in the use of pounds and in jumps, usually a shaman or a medicine man would, he had a job of calling the bison to the trap during a communal hunt. And we believe that might be what these features represent, as a shaman or a medicine man would have been across from the jump and through his prayers calling the bison to the jump for the people. And I should point out that the suggestion that that's what these features might be, which are, they're mostly these semicircular stone alignments, which have other stones sort of incorporated in significant ways. The suggestion that they might be prayer circles was actually made by one of the tribal monitors that was working with us in 2014. So, and this is just another view of from that area where these features were found to the drive line on the opposite side of the creek. And so, we think that the groups were coming here in the fall hunting bison and then likely moving on into the main interior of the hills for the winter, and probably would have broken up into smaller groups as they moved into the hills for the winter, probably following Beaver Creek Canyon and also possibly Cottonwood Creek and Wind Cave Canyon. And we've found many sites in the more interior parts of the park that have, say, like 4 or 5 stone circles just on these little terraces in these canyons, and that's, would probably represent these smaller family groups and winter camps. So again, just to kind of give you an idea of what that trip might have been like to move into the interior of the hills, following Beaver Creek Canyon this time, and we will be doing inventory in Beaver Creek Canyon next summer. Really looking forward to getting a chance to get in there and see what we see. So you can see how that canyon, continue to follow it, take you into the more interior portions of the hill. Sorry about having to jump back and forth. I couldn't figure out how to make it work from inside the PowerPoint. So the presence of this important site is one of the reasons that the National Park Service wanted to acquire this land and add it to the park. Despite the extensive archaeological record at the park, there really hasn't been much of an effort on their part in the past to interpret American Indian history to park visitors. And park staff, I think, see this site as an opportunity to more fully embrace the prehistory of the park, engage affiliated tribes, and educate the public about the history of Native people and their relationship to the Black Hills. These are some of the monitors and volunteers that worked with us last year. So the park plans to interpret the buffalo jump to the public, and that's one of the reasons that we've been able to conduct the research that we have at the park so far, because they realized they needed to know more about it if they were going to interpret it. And while it's an excellent opportunity to tell a story of the prehistoric life within the hills, as archaeologists, we must also make sure that we provide accurate information for interpretation, as well as protect the resource from damage from visitors. So for that reason, we work very closely with park planners to determine the best locations for interpretive signs and other features like trails and visitor facilities like parking lots and restrooms. And that's an ongoing process. And along those lines, the park has held several consultation meetings with multiple tribes to discuss their plans for interpretation and visitor use. And again, they also have invited tribal monitors to work with us during our investigations. Unfortunately, we didn't have anybody join us in 2012, but we did have 3 folks from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe visit us, work with us last year. And their assistance and input was just invaluable to our investigations. And going forward, we'll continue to work with the tribes as we discover more about the site and the park plans to interpret it. And the park does plan to have the tribes help develop interpretive materials for signs or displays. The park wants to make sure that their story is being told the way they want the story to be told. So I think that's going to be a great opportunity, and I think just the opportunity to really interpret this kind of site to the public is going to be very valuable, I think, visitor experience. We've already sort of begun the public education. We held a media day in 2012 as well as a public day, and we also had a public day in 2014. We had a lot of visitors come out to the site. The site has also been the subject of several news articles and a TV station video last year. So a lot of the progress that we've made has been due to the great help of volunteers and the crew. So I just in closing, I want to thank the volunteers that came and worked with us and the crews that have worked with us over both years on these.
Wow, I think you nailed it, Ann. I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry that I didn't interrupt you at the time, but when you were looking at, when you were showing us the distribution of the different types of cultural resources, it looked like there was a concentration of stone tools on top of the plateau. Did I have that right?
Yes. There's a couple of different areas where we have concentrations of, was it that one you were looking at this one, or?
No, it was an earlier one.
Okay.
Also, I mean, that one might work just as well to demonstrate.
Yeah, there's several different areas where we have concentrations. Maybe this is one of the ones you were thinking of.
It is.
Concentrations of artifacts, and this one where there's all those little green and yellow and blue dots. That's an area where it's sort of eroded out, and then there's also other areas that you can see where there's a lot of exposed bedrock. And so some of those concentrations are more of a result of visibility, I think, than activity. But we were finding in these areas up on the ridges, like where the bedrock areas are and those higher points, that's where we were finding a lot of scrapers. And so we think that that's where they were doing high processing, taking advantage of the higher areas, angles of the sun, and air movement to dry hides.
Ah, okay. Huh, how interesting. Did you see any shift, or do you have enough resolution to be able to see different parts of this landscape being used at different times in the past? Or is it is the scale, too broad to be to discriminate that way?
Yeah, I think mostly we're lacking dating information probably to assess whether different parts were being used, at different times. I mean, I think the site was being revisited time and again. I think, maybe on an annual basis or maybe less often than that. But I think groups were moving through at different times. And likely, depending on the size of the group that was there, they may have, set up their teepees in one area one year and then taken advantage of a different area another year. I had hoped to try to recover some radiocarbon samples from hearth features in the stone circles, but we haven't had time yet to excavate any of those. So the only radiocarbon dates we have are from a hearth, which is down on the valley floor, and then, of course, the hearth that Agenbrod excavated, which is also at the bone bed, and then the actual bison going from the bone bed. So I think we need some more dating information to look at whether different areas were used at different times.
Was this site previously known to the tribes that you worked with?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. I've had some individuals tell me that they were aware of the site and that the tribe is aware of that site and that they, that it's in their tribal knowledge. But other groups that have gone out there have not made that kind of indication. So I think to some it might have been.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought about archaeologists being able to augment or, reinforce or even inform tribes about their own tribal history.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I kind of want to work on going forward, because I'm learning about other proto-historic period sites in the park. So I'm really hoping to work with the tribes more in terms of, what do we know and what do they know, and how can that inform, their enhancing their knowledge of their history in the park area.
Wow, what an interesting project. What do you have planned for the coming year?
Well, we're going to do, like I mentioned, we're going to do more inventory in Beaver Creek Canyon. The park, of course, wants to open up the entire Casey Addition to visitor use, and so they have a draft visitor use plan, but we want to inventory as much of it as we can before they put trails in and start opening it up to backcountry camping, so that we know what areas might need to be protected or closed off.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Anne?